Now to recognize Mr. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for both of our witnesses for being here. Ms. Cruz-Kane, one of the most concerning facts about the FAFSA simplification rollout, the debacle that was that, is that, or that continues to be that, is that the Biden-Harris administration knew that the release would be delayed and broken, and your investigation found that over a year in advance, in August of 22, the Department of Education began preparing for this delayed release of the form and adjusting deadlines from October 23 to December 23, but the public wasn't notified until March 23. My understanding is that the department's contract to create the form named 25 key system requirements that would define what a fully functioning FAFSA would entail. Can you briefly discuss some of those requirements?
Sure. So the 25 requirements were broken out. 8 of them related to the input and the development of the form, 10 of them eligibility determination calculations, and 7 of them were related to results distribution and availability. And 7 of those 25 were released in the initial release. And then in March 2024, 9 more were deployed. And in December, the ones that were deployed were mainly focused on input. And then in March, with the 9 more that were deployed, they were focused on the eligibility calculations. And then we are unsure of when the rest of them are going to be released. FSA told us that they were going to release them in the subsequent cycles, beginning this next cycle and ending in the 2027-2028 FAFSA cycle.
So they initially failed to fulfill the 18 contractual obligations, 7 out of 25, but they released the form anyway, correct? Correct. Yeah. And they waited a year after that to conduct a requirements oversight review to ensure that it was ready, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah, it's obviously very concerning. In your testimony, you also mentioned the importance of having effective IT leadership, particularly from the CIO. Have the CIOs conducted frequent progress reviews of FAFSA?
So we do know that the education CIO, normally a project of this scale would be talked at high-level annual and quarter reviews, but this particular project was never discussed at any of them. Also, education applies risk ratings to IT systems, and this one received a risk rating of 3 in September 2021, and then the risk rating was never updated again until 5 months after the deployment. So that's pretty concerning that they weren't monitoring the contract, monitoring the status of the system, and updating the risk rating, because 3 is sort of moderate. At this point, 5 would be more appropriate.
So it's a 1 to 5 scale, and they
Yes,
got
sir.
a 3. Yeah. Last week, well, as you know, education departments had 6 CIOs since the enactment of the FAFSA simplification. Again, I put that in quotes, just 3 years ago. And last week, they announced that there's hiring yet another CIO. I'm guessing that you might agree that another change in leadership is needed or warranted. But again, with this turnover, it, I think, illustrates the chaos that's marked this process. How would you say this constant turnover in CIO, 6 in about 3 years, has impacted the FAFSA development?
We didn't look at the turnover more as just the role that that person would play in the process. So education CIO did not have a defined role in the FPS rollout. They delegated their authority to the FSA CIO, which we also found that they did not have a big role or a defined role in what they were supposed to do during significant milestones during the rollout. So at the education level, they were delegating to FSA, so the turnover there, it was 6 people, but if they weren't discussing it with the CIO, then the effect, we are unsure what that would be.
You know, I've heard from several universities in my district about not just the FAFSA challenges, but the continued additional requirements from the department. You know, it's the financial aid administrators who bear the burden of the mistakes made by the education department. When the department wasn't answering their phones, the financial aid administrators at the colleges across the country are the ones having to talk to the parents and the students, but they're in the dark in terms of the answers that they can provide from the department because of their failures. And so we need to keep remembering that it's the students, it's the parents, and it's the institutions that suffer, and the American people suffer as a result. Thank you again to both of our witnesses, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to now recognize Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.